refashion our society so we do see a new world order. Because if you don't have an idea of what the next world or the new world is going to look like, then I, as an educator, and the University of Fiji as an institution that provides the education, is not able to plan on its education, to program it. In the past, we have very much been dictated by industry. Somebody tells us what the national priorities are. Somebody tells us what the top industries are in Fiji where you should train people to find jobs. Industry tells education what to do, or has done in the past. Industry collapsing is not able to tell us what to do anymore. So we have to think about how education can reform industry so that we can have our students go through and find a job at the end of the day in industries that are not going to take only 6 weeks to collapse like more or less tourism did. You need robust industries that are going to be sustainable and are able to survive. And we need to know that because we need to put programs in place in order to be able to ensure that our students have a job at the end of the day. And if not a job in industry at the end of the day, that they have enough competence and enough knowledge to be able to be self-employed as well. Self-employment is something that people don't really look at. Self-employment is usually for people who really don't want a 9-to-5 job or don't want to make that much money. They just want to enjoy their lives for whatever reason. But self-employment has become a really important category of the spectrum of employment that we need to think about now as a nation and also as a university. So if you look at our program, we're going to be moving smartly through this program, and I've asked the speakers to please keep to their times. We have first of all, a keynote address by Dr. Simon Mayer, who's an ecological economist. And I don't need to explain to you what an ecological economist is. You understand the focus that he will be taking from the School of Management at the University of Bradford in the United Kingdom. Now, in the very first article, the very first paper in your set of documents here, is what struck me when I first read it about Dr. Simon's work. And it's called Neoliberal Economics, Planetary Health, and the COVID-19 Pandemic. A Marxist eco-feminist analysis. Well, that is in fact, it's like, oh my goodness, who's talking about Marx now? We all know about feminism, but who's talking about, can you put it on? Who's talking about Marx now? My goodness, isn't that so 19th century? And, since the advent of the USSR and China and all these unpopular places, we say, well, nobody really wants that kind of an economic perspective on life. But people are revisiting all different philosophies now. That's what we all have to do. We can't say we condemn that because we have a political difference about it, or we condemn something else because today Marx, tomorrow might be feminism. And that's something that I personally would have a problem with, because I think the feminist viewpoint is one that ought to have been taken quite a long time ago in order for us not to rape the planet in the way that it has been raped, and not to have climate change issues that we do, and the different multitasking circular way of thinking. So this is what Dr. Mayer is going to be talking about. And after that, his paper, by the way, is called Value. And if you read that paper, you will realize what he's talking about in terms of exchange value and how deficient it is with respect to having to cope with COVID-19. Then the second address will be by our own Professor Dean of the UPSM Medical School and Health Sciences, Professor Fred Merchant, and he will give us an update on COVID-19. Now, obviously, things change from day to day. COVID-19, this morning's news said the WHO, one of the WHO experts said that they won't be able to roll out the vaccines for everybody in the world for at least a year. So I'm not worried too much about the fact of whether or not we're going to be infected. I'm really more worried about the recession that means for the global economy. How long is it going to continue for? Because IMF has already said that once we've got control of the virus, it's going to take another year for the economy, the world economy, to restore itself. So we're looking at best, a 2-year recession, economic recession globally. And because we depend through our trade on what the global economy looks like, This is really a problem for us, and we've got to address that as well. The next one is Dr. Sunil Kumar, who is a development economist, and he will be talking about taking the National Development Plan itself, the 5-year and 20-year one, transforming Fiji, and making some salient points about that. After that, I will be talking about education, and I've just put that down as education generally, because I'm not confining myself to education, higher education. I'm actually looking at the problem of education generally. In Fiji, we're all confining ourselves to Fiji, but it has obviously links with overseas as well. Professor Bauman, over the past, he's sitting there, he's our Dean of Education, Humanities and Arts School, and he's been talking about for a long time as the curriculum being dead. Now the curriculum is dead as far as he's concerned, or moribund is the word that's used by another eminent professor from overseas, even before COVID. And now it's not just dead, but I think the funeral has to be organized. So we're looking at whether the education system, our education system, and the education system the world over, in fact copes with what we need to do in order to fashion a new curriculum, a different kind of curriculum for the 21st century, because we're in the third decade of the 21st century. We can't say we're just new to the century, it's the third decade of the 21st century. So I think we need to start looking at the notion of the curriculum, not just for higher education, but also primary and secondary education. And if you look at the education strategic plan of the government, then you will realize, or in fact it's the country's strategic plan, you realize what we need to do in order to be able to have a discussion about that. Then we'll have a break, and then everyone will move in their groups. We've got questions like last time, and you'll be deliberating. People are from different areas, so we'll be putting them together in groups so that you have a good, robust discussion amongst you from the different industries, from the different NGOs, the different places and organizations and so on. Also your individuals, you're invited as opinion shapers as well. So that's going to happen, and then after that, after lunch, there will be the presentation of the roundtable deliberations back to the plenary, and then there will be open forum and a set of resolutions which we will make, and then it will be available to the whole of Fiji through the media as well, because that's what's going to become public. So that's the program for today. We have with us some people who have participants who are joining us by Zoom. So I think about 5 or 6 people, so they'll be listening to everything. They will also be taking part in the group discussions, because we've got a laptop on each table, and so everyone who's part of this forum will be able to express themselves as well. So we're connecting with everyone. This is very much a reality of COVID-19, that we've got, the community has grown, and part of that communication strategy is to include people by Zoom or by technology, online technology, so that nobody gets left out. It's something that we've been doing with our teaching as well, doing teaching via face-to-face as well as Zoom, so that our students are all connected. Basically, our educated community is getting bigger and bigger, and we really like that, because the more educated and informed people are, not in the strict sense of education, like the curriculum, the strict curriculum or the discipline, but in the broader sense of everyone in society, in my view, from cradle to the grave, should have access to education, whatever form of education you have. So that's really our program. So without anything further, let me introduce Dr. Simon Mayer, and he's there from Bradford, a very cold UK, I'm told, not as hot as what we're experiencing now. So Dr. Mayer, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and thank you for having me over here. Very happy to be here and see if I can share my screen. Can you all hear me okay? And can you all see my screen? Yes. Okay, so what I want to talk to you about today then is this question of value, or to put it differently, what is the economy actually for? So I want to start with this quote, which is from a piece of work done by a group in the UK called Economy. And they went round and asked members of the public, what do you think of when you think of the economy? What does the economy mean to you? And this particular quote really grabbed my attention that has its own consciousness. Perhaps it's more of a monster. And what this tells us, I think, what this speaks to, is a sense of alienation that we have from our economy. This sense that it's something which is outside of us, outside of our society. It's something that we don't have any control over. Maybe our politicians can try and steer it. When things go well, it will be okay. But when things go badly, like we're seeing now, there's nothing we can do. We just have to kind of sit back and hope that we're not hurt too badly by this monster. And there are two things I want to say about this. One is, I don't think it's true that the economy is something which exists outside of our society. And two, it's where this idea comes from. So this sentiment, I think, comes from, in part, from some of the ways that we talk about the economy. And what we talk about when we talk about the economy is money. And this is where value comes in. Because the monetary value is really just one specific form of value. It's one specific reason that we try and produce things, that we do economic activities. And in fact, what I want to talk about is some ways that monetary value, using that as kind of the only way or the main way that we organise our economies, is really a mistake. So what I want to introduce you to today is an alternative idea of what the economy is or what it could be. And this is an idea of the economy which is rooted in feminist economics and in ecological economics. And we start here with the idea that the economy is an inherently social system. It's really relationships between people and between classes of people. And from this, we take the idea that the economy is just the system that we use to transform and distribute Earth's resources. So not only is it relationships between people, it's relationships between people and their environment. And that's what this figure that you're seeing on the side of the slide is trying to show you. So it starts with the idea of the Earth as all-encompassing. And sitting within the Earth is our society, and within society is the economy itself. And the way the system works is that the economy takes materials and matter, combines them with energy, and then uses them to produce things that we need or what we want. And the other thing that you'll notice here is that the economy is split into four different sectors. There's the market, where we buy and we sell, and that produces monetary value. But there are also other elements. There's a household, the state, and the economies. And within any given economic system, there are multiple ways of kind of rebalancing those four systems, all of which produce their own specific form of value. And so because these four systems all exist within any kind of economic sector, we can rearrange them in different ways. At the moment, what we prioritise is the market producing monetary value. But we can imagine forms of economy which operate in a different logic, which prioritise other ways and reasons for producing money. And so, what I want to talk about is a particular view of the economy that we have today. So we live in a neoliberal capitalist society. And the view, the story that this tells about the economy is one which prioritises buying and selling. It's one which prioritises the production of monetary value. And that's what this diagram is trying to show you. So everything above that line you see in the middle is the monetised economy. It's those actions, those economic actions, the transformation of those resources that we can put a price on, that we can put a monetary value. And those words above the line are the ways that we talk and think about the monetised economy under neoliberalism. So we talk about the monetised economy as productive, it's valuable. We develop elaborate accounting systems so we can count and measure down what's going on. But there's another side of this triangle, another aspect of the economy. And those aspects are the ecological processes and the caring activities, the day-to-day ways of using and producing resources that we need just to live. And these are things which are essential to the monetised economy. They support it, and without it we couldn't have a monetised economy. We couldn't produce that monetary value. So every transaction, every act of buying, every act of selling is inherently material. So sometimes this can be fairly obvious. So the shirt that I've got on, for example, is made of cotton. That had to be dug up out of the ground, processed using energy, dyed, transformed before it became a shirt. So the material aspect is quite clear. But there are that materiality is there in kind of other areas as well. So I'm currently talking to you virtually, and we might think about being kind of dematerialized. But actually, I'm speaking to you through my laptop, you've got some kind of material screen there. And of course, our conversation has been being around the Earth on these kind of satellites and using servers which require metals to be dug from the ground and heated and transformed and manipulated. And for decades now, feminist economists have been telling us that actually the monetary economy depends on the kind of the unpaid work, the caring work which often happens in a household. If people weren't there to raise children, there would be no workers for the monetized economy. But by obsessing over the purchasing, the selling, the production of monetary value, what the neoliberal view of the economy does is it hides those processes. The ecology that we need to live and the caring activities that we need to live disappear from view in favour of producing more and more monetary value. And what this does, this kind of hiding these key processes, is it diverts resources away from those things which are so essential to our lives. People, money, materials flow away from the ecological processes, flow away from caring activities in order to produce more and more monetary value. And we see this neoliberal story, this idea that everything should be about buying and selling, in lots of different places. So these two quotes are taken from a Ministry of Education, Heritage and Arts strategic document for Fiji. And the first quote, what we have here is the ministry saying that the key challenge is developing an education system which enables developing employers and employees of the economies of today and tomorrow. And the second quote is about how the ultimate challenge of education is to produce students and learners who are able to be better employees, better employers, and better entrepreneurs. And what we see here is this consistent focus on producing more and more monetary value, but turning an education system over to producing more monetary value. Because employees are people who sell their labour, employers are people who buy that labour, while entrepreneurs are people who come up with new ways to facilitate the purchasing and selling of labour. And what I want to do really is remind you that actually there are lots of ways that we can arrange this economy. There are lots of different ways that we can build an economy in the future. And so should an education system be focused on preparing students to only be able to take part in one possible form of that future? Or do we actually want an education system that can provide students with the ability to produce lots of different types of value and a much more varied, rewarding economy? And really where I want to leave you, and I guess one of what this is a provocation for us today, is to suggest that what we actually want to get is an economy which doesn't leave people giving us this quote, an economy that doesn't feel like it's outside of us, but actually an economy which we do have power and control over in order to turn it into something which produces value on a much wider scale than monetary value. So thank you very much. I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Mayer. We will probably not have time to take questions just now, but they will come up in the groups, no doubt. I think one of the things that we need to find out, because you've left us with a little bit of a big, huge question mark, and that is that how do we revision everything? Is it the society that needs to do that? I mean, everyone is on this Train to Nowhere, which is about the monetary value. So I think that's something that we've taken from your address this morning. And so thank you for that. And we will continue to ask that question. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the plenary, the addresses this morning. Thank you. Now may I ask Professor Merchant to talk about, give us an update on COVID-19.
Good morning, one and all. Can you hear me? Yeah. While he's adjusting the slides, I think we shouldn't waste this airtime. That's fine. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and Madam Chair, thank you for having me, and greetings to all the faculty and guests. While we're waiting, I'm going to talk about viruses and about what's besieging us at the moment. And I'm going to start by asking you a few questions after I talk about me, of course. And I will say, yeah, that's fine. How do I, this one? How do I point this on? Okay, got it. I think so. Well, my title is Before You. Can all hear me? Thank you. I'm just going to ask you a few questions and make a few remarks before we get started. I've been a surgeon about 448,000 hours, whatever that means to you. That's how I think. And I teach my students to think in those terms. And I'm going to mention a few medical perspectives before I get into the body. And one of the things that strikes me is the following. There's never anything ever funny about death. It just isn't funny. And we're seeing a lot of that because of this virus. Also because of the virus, there is a positive aspect of it, and I've said this before. Because of this, medicine has had the most incredible amount of free advertising ever. Everybody is interested in health. There's no escaping the fact that it's in the news. There are many problems. Of course, we've escaped many of them and avoided many of them here in Fiji. But we have an unprecedented display of advertising for medicine. That is all of medicine. All of healthcare giving professionals are being advertised these days. Now I'm going to make a few remarks before I get into the slides. How many of you, by a show of hands, have been swabbed for this virus? Anyone? Not one person? That's amazing. Not one person. That's pretty amazing. In most places, a lot of people put their hands up because they've been swabbed. And I'm sure you've seen it on YouTube or some other particular place. I've been swabbed a number of times. It's not the most fun thing to have done, but it does its job. And there's no simple way to sort of get at what these viruses are doing until we do a swab. It doesn't really invade beyond the surface of your tissues, but it's not like a fun thing to have done. Fortunately, we've been able to avoid the need for swabs in the general public. A few have had them, of course, in the hospital environment, etc. I'm going to mention just a few things to get us on the right track. Everyone in this room has heard of the word virus. We all know viruses. And it's become much more popular because we have electronic devices which we do not want to have a virus. And when I ask my students what is a virus, they talk about a variety of different things, but the word virus was picked out because it means poison. It's like a regular something, it's poison. If you get a virus in your electronic device, you know it may spell the end of the function, the life of that particular device. So viruses are different from this particular virus. It's very different because of what it can do and what it has done. Viruses and other small organisms are in and on this earth in numbers that are absolutely staggering. They're around us, and viruses have been here a long time, all potentially lethal. As has been said by Bryson, most things in this world are small, and they will be here long after we're gone. They'll be here forever. They'll be here long after all of you are gone. They'll be here when the sun explodes, because they are in numbers that are absolutely hard to conceive of. They're in this room, they're everywhere, they're ubiquitous. The one that we are wrestling with happens to be a particular one that's potentially deadly, and of course we know about that. What is this business about viruses? Just a little bit of a history I think is always important. When Jenner and Pasteur discovered vaccination, they had no idea there was such a thing as a virus, but they were able to cure diseases by doing certain things without knowing what they were curing. Later, the virus was discovered via the tobacco mosaic plant using what's called the Chamberlain filter, which is historically very important, and it was able to separate out from water these particular invisible particles, which were never ever seen until the electron microscope was invented and developed following World War II. So all of these years we've been here on the planet, we had no idea these things were here. Now, of course, it's in the news, and we have a great deal of information about them. But guess what? At the end, I'm going to tell you what's coming next. We all want to know about tomorrow. Everyone gets up thinking, what's going to happen tomorrow? At the end, I'll tell you a little bit about what's going to happen next. So, just push this one. Yeah. Here's a virus. And I'm going to give you a few statistics, so bear with me. Yeah, there we go. Worldwide, the first of this COVID was identified in December 2019, and these are just some numbers. And at this point, we have this particular number of cases. The number is staggering, 112 million. The number of people infected and the number of deaths listed here, and we're counting. As we sit here, the number of infected individuals is racking up at about 400,000 per day. 400,000 is more than half the size of our entire population. So the numbers are staggering, and they are continuing to mount as I speak. Fiji has been very fortunate. We've had good governance, if you will, controlling the population, and we've had things called a curfew. Everyone knows the word curfew. What does it mean to have a curfew? Well, to us it means you can't drive your car up to a certain hour and don't go on the street. But the word curfew comes from a French term. When they had these pandemics, they would put the fires out at night. That means you can't go out at night. You shouldn't be out because it's dangerous. You can't see at night, so they put out the fires, and that's called a curfew. Fiji, as you can see by the slide, we have been spared most of the onslaught of this virus. 57 with two deaths and 54 recovered. That's rather remarkable. So I think all of us have been spared because we live as we do, and we've had some authorities who have been able to control situations. We haven't had much of an impact. Most of the impact has come because of what's called an airplane. We are fairly isolated in the South Pacific, but we do have access to the rest of the world by modern air travel. Air travel has changed a variety of different things with respect to how organisms move, how they travel, how they go from one country, one part of the world to the other, and we're facing that, and we will face it for the foreseeable future. It has been 341 days since Fiji diagnosed its first case at that date, March 19, 2020. And since then, many things have changed in our society. ABC has mentioned some of them. The economy clearly has been impacted. When this first hit the scene, there was no impact on the economy. The airport was open for business. I was away in Australia on a vacation. A few people were wearing a mask, which seemed odd at the time, and most of them were from Asia, someplace in Asia. Who wants to wear a mask when it's 35 degrees? Nobody wanted to wear a mask, and it seemed just strange and odd. The aircraft had some passengers. Nobody was wearing a mask. There was no evidence of social distancing or taking particular precautions about how we behaved on the aircraft. But all of that, of course, has changed. The last 39 cases in Fiji have been associated with border crossing and quarantines, and those are people who come into the country, and most of us know that. We have strict controls at the air traffic entry, and of course with ships coming with goods, cargo, there's a control at that level as well. Fiji has now had 57 cases total. There's one active case. Don't visit that person at the moment. There are 54 recovering individuals, and there have been 2 deaths. When I show you a few statistics about death, you'll say this is remarkable. We've only had 2 deaths, and that's really, truly remarkable. And all that's been since March 19, 2020. This was a bit of a repeat of the same, 56, 54 recover, 2. This is looking at the heavyweights, the people who, the countries that, the individuals, the places in the world that are not like Fiji. And guess what country is right at the top? Yes, I know it well. And I won't get into the politics of crazy, but there's been some crazy politics which help to explain why we, the U.S., is at the top. The number is staggering. 500,000 people dead, and more dying as I speak. That's half of our population. And this isn't counting people who are still sick, who are taking up room in hospitals, who require intensive care, all the support systems that you read about. They are having those, and they can't keep up with it. And you look down the list, and you can see the rest of the countries. I may not read them exactly, but India, Brazil, etc., all the way down. Excuse me. There was a time when this all started to the news, and people were very critical of Spain. What they're doing, they can't control it, etc. Changed, and they have changed their ways, and they've managed to control it. While this country, my country, has remained at the top. There is politics involved with managing large populations, and it isn't just the doctors or the nurses or the medical establishment. It involves all of us, all of this particular malady. This is where we live, in the South Pacific, and you can see the numbers dropped off dramatically. There is Fiji, with its 57, and then we walk down and we see the other countries. They're not dangerous to us. This is a place where people would love to come. Don't let them in. Don't let them come to the airport. Keep them away. Believe me, we protect Fiji. Again, this is a repeat, just 2 deaths. Measures taken. 10 ways you can help reduce this virus, and you probably have seen this, and I'll just quickly go over it. Your hands are very dangerous animals. Obviously, they're not animals. They're dangerous parts of your body. The human hand can do things that are unimaginable. One of the things it can do is spread things from one place to another. The other thing it can do is develop tools and devices that can kill at a distance. With COVID, you don't have to have much distance. You can be an arm's length and you can spread this virus. Wearing a mask, I carry a mask with me. Maintain your social distancing, all of the things that you've heard. Why is 2 meters used? Because when we cough or we wave our arm, that's about as far as things will leave and go if they're going to touch someone else. ABC, don't jump. But if you're closer, it may escape from the skin, my skin in this regard, and land someplace in your neighborhood. Or if I cough or clear my throat, there are invisible particles that obviously you can contact. And the list goes on. Touching surfaces, try to keep your hands away from your face and your eyes. Stop sharing things. We don't have to be concerned about it as much here. People still share. If you think you have symptoms, you need to have a test. What are the symptoms? I'll go over a few of them in a moment. And have a plan if you get sick. Some people think if I get sick, I'll just go to the hospital, which may be fine. But you also have to think, am I going to contaminate, spread, or expose others to this particular illness? And then you should be prepared for needs if you stay away from home a long time. Is this important? Yes. We have medical students from out of the country who've not been able to go home for almost a year. They weren't prepared for this. They didn't know they were going to come to Fiji from wherever they came and spend a year here. It's been extremely stressful. I had to stay home for just 3 days waiting on the results of my swab, and it was it made me a little bit edgy to know that I couldn't go outside, I couldn't go to the store, I just couldn't do these things. Most of you don't think this way. You move freely wherever you're going, you contact your workmates, your family, the world is open to you. But when it's shrunken down, when it shrinks around you, it changes how you perceive and how you function within your environment. That's something we don't have a particular preoccupation with here in Fiji. What about high-risk people over the age of 60? And you can see what we mean: heart disease, diabetes, we have all of this in our community, lung disease, taking immune suppressive drugs, kidney disease, and down the line to the bottom, which is alcohol. All of these things increase your risk for the potential of developing, if you are exposed to not just having the COVID, but having the COVID virus syndrome, which means you are going to be ill. Most of us at the moment are not traveling out of the country, so we're not concerned about this. However, the virus is invisible, and if it does enter our community, into the country, by the time we find out, it's going to be a little bit late in terms of what it has already accomplished. Where did this outbreak start? Again, this is, I think, is something you probably already know. In China, the Wuhan virus, etc. Most common symptoms are fever, dry cough, and tiredness, but we all sometimes have that. I know you're hardworking academics, and some of you get tired at the end of the day. You don't have COVID. It's just that your brain is working too hard, doing your work for your students, and being perhaps someone who adjudicates in law, for example, but it doesn't mean you have COVID. Less common symptoms, aches and pains. Who doesn't have an ache or pain once in a while? We all do from time to time. Sore throats, diarrhea, etc. Rash on your skin, discoloration of your fingers and toes. If you do happen to be a diabetic, you should really pay attention to this. Even though we don't have COVID, you should pay attention nonetheless. Serious symptoms, difficulty breathing or shortness of breath, chest pain or pressure in the chest, loss of speech or movement. These are highlights that you may have something that's serious. These are things that at this point we're not particularly overly concerned with because we don't have the virus, but in dealing with something that's invisible, you should never, ever, ever completely let down your guard. You never know because it's invisible. Provisional diagnosis, symptoms, nasal swab, confirmation, reverse transcriptase polymerase. It's a test that we have, and I'll talk to you a little bit about the swab at the end. This is just showing what the swab is all about, and it usually is a Q-tip with a cotton bud. There's some other ones that are used. Some have tiny brushes that are soft bristles, and it's placed in your nose, and it goes pretty far in your nose. And most people don't know that they're swabbing your turbinates. You have turbinates in your nose, which help to delay the passage of air, allow it to pick up moisture, allow it to change its temperature before it actually enters your laryngopharynx on its way to your lungs. So when you have a swab, it has to wipe off some of the mucus and secretions on top of your swab, on top of your turbinates. If you look in the mirror, and all of you probably have, you'll see kind of mucously looking material sticking out from the bridge of your nose. Those are your turbinates, and they're very important. If you don't have turbinates, you can't really enjoy air conditioning because the air gets too dry and it becomes uncomfortable to breathe. I think this is something that we had a hint of the other day. This is what COVID looks like on a chest x-ray of an individual. It should be clear, but this looks like a fog, like a storm on this person's chest. This is very serious, and if one is examining and listening to this person as a patient, the breath sounds are not normal, and we recognize that, and we have other machines that measure it, but this looks like something that's extremely serious. This person could be facing a serious post-COVID experience or even death. This one is clearly far advanced with a number of different collections of fluid, tubes and the like, and the patient's lungs almost obscuring the outline of the heart. This patient is probably on his or her way to other places. Vaccines. It's more than a year since the virus emerged, and these are the three big companies that are producing them. The one that we are slated to have here is the AstraZeneca, Oxford AstraZeneca. Each of these companies, these three companies, have pretty much a hold on the market. At the end, I'll show you one other country that's producing them. But these are the ones that are being manufactured. The ones, give you a little bit, the one at the top it's an American company, Moderna is a different one, and this Oxford is a European country. They use slightly different techniques to achieve the same goal. Pfizer, Moderna, they've developed an RNA vaccine. It's an approach that is incredibly quick to design so they can change it, and this is important because we know this virus is mutating, and everybody knows in the newspaper it changes, and it seems to be changing its strains and its construction. So Pfizer and Moderna are pretty much on top of that. They have small fragments they use with genetic codes to help our bodies recognize them if we come in contact with them. Oxford AstraZeneca, which is the one I had been told by the authorities in the health department. It's probably the one that we will have available in Fiji, Oxford AstraZeneca. This vaccine represents and recognizes a subtle difference between transport in the body, and it allows our genetic system and our immune system to recognize it. And it's, I think, the one that we're going to have. In the hospitals, there's a grading schedule for people who are at high risk, for example, working in the intensive care in the emergency room, etc. And I'm sure there's some political issues, but we try to be fair with how it's going to be administered. And I know it will be in the news when it actually arrives, but I don't think we're looking at its arrival for at least a month, perhaps longer. This is just a review of what these look like. The company is on your left. Oxford, they've all been approved in the UK. The ones at the bottom are pending. This is the type of vaccine that's administered with this particular company, RNA, protein-based, etc. Most of them will require 2 shots, so you have to get them in a sequence. And this one has a refrigerated temperature which is fairly regular. And then this one, this has been a problem because maintaining minus 70 degrees centigrade takes a lot of energy and care in terms of how it's shipped. This one is less, 20 degrees centigrade, regular refrigerated temperatures, regular. So the ones that are regular will have an advantage in terms of how they may be purchased and the quantities and how they're stored. Extremely important in our environment, which is obviously tropical. So keeping something at minus 70 takes a lot of energy and care and handling and how it's distributed to the recipients. What is on the list for us in the future? Like I said at the beginning, microbes are in numbers that are absolutely staggering, and they will be here when the sun explodes. Our next generation, your children's children, your grandchildren, they may be wrestling with something called prions. Prions are on the horizon. They are much more difficult to deal with than viruses. Probably the most common prion that people know about is Kuru, which is a nervous attacking virus, and it's found in Papua New Guinea, and the other, which is mad cow disease. And with respect to this, we do have cows in our country, and cows are probably coexisting with us for many years, but these new organisms are going to require a lot of research, a lot of money and investment, because they will emerge at some time in the future. So if you're looking at what's coming tomorrow, keep your eyes and ears not just on the COVID, but what is coming tomorrow and the next day, and that's these prions. Thank you very much. You've been a great audience. I wish you well. Stay away from people who are coughing, and watch how you exchange your various and sundry body cells with others. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Merchant. I don't think we want any more bad news about prions or anything else. Thank you very much. We can really cope with coronavirus, but it's scary because I think somebody's going to ask, some people are going to definitely ask you a question about how you get infected with prions. Is it like a coronavirus infection, or is it something different?
It's going to be different.
It's going to be different. Okay. Well, we don't really want to know too much detail. We just want to know that we're not going to get it. Our next speaker, I'm very happy to introduce Dr. Sunil Kumar, who is a development economist, and he's made a study of Fiji's National Development Plan from the point of view of us making some significant amendments to it or alterations to it that will be because of the coronavirus and because of the situation that currently faces us. So Dr. Kumar.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chancellor. Good morning, everyone. I'll quickly hit the road. I have many slides to go over, but some of those I have kept there just for information to have sight, and I would probably be skipping some of them if I'm getting late. All right, so I have a scheme here to. All right, this is slow. All right, okay. I'll just give a brief introduction, and then we'll look at global and Pacific economies, what's happening out there, and then we would look at the sectoral components of our economy, and then I'll come to the Fiji's national plan for 20 years from 2017, and then some of my interpretations and analysis as to what needs to happen, and I'll briefly hit on the education issue and conclusion. All right, the pandemic has caused a lot of pain, as you know. A huge number of countries are drastically affected, and there's some narratives out here that I have picked up from the World Bank and IMF documents. For information, EMDs are emerging markets and developing economies. What it says is that they have regressed back in time in terms of coping with their poverty issues. So which means more and more, and millions of people have now driven back into poverty. It says here that we have probably slipped back 10 years now, which means that a lot of work will have to be done by governments. You know, your patchwork will not do, which means that we will need government that really get serious about fixing the problems. Now, but before I go into the severity of the economic issues, I have given a brief picture of what the world has seen historically. The problem, it seems, is that human beings don't learn much from history. But the fact is now, like all the information out there, click of the button, you know what had happened 100 years ago, even 1,000 years ago, all right? Just have a look. Third plague, 1855, killed 12 million people. Yeah, that's about 1% of the population at the time. Spanish flu killed about 40 to 50 million people, exact number not known. Now, that's huge percentage of the world population. World War II killed 75 million. World War I probably 20 or so million. In terms of number of deaths, COVID-19 is nothing, really. Now, indeed, death is horrible, as the mentioned has said. Any form of death is horrible for us human beings. But if you look at what the number is at the moment in 1 year of COVID, and the vaccine is there, all right? But the economic impact will be felt, and will be felt pretty drastically for us. We have already seen it. It's sort of coming out, but no. And this is the last point, measles and smallpox. I thought I pick it up because that had great, huge effect on Fiji. 40,000 people died of measles in Fiji. Most of you don't know that. And that was in 1870s or 1880s. Yeah? Can you imagine? 40,000 Fijians died at that time of measles, and smallpox killed millions and millions. Right, so there's some picture. If this goes into our repository, you would be able to click and have a look. All right. All right, coming back to the economics of it. So you can see here the global report, the World Bank report, says beyond the short-term economic outlook, policymakers face formidable challenges in the following. Health, for us not much, but globally it has been a huge issue, and it was a huge cost. You can see what is happening in the US, in Europe, and in the rest of the world. Debt management, economics of it. Countries have their own strategies. We have our own, pretty grim one in fact, so I'll talk about it. Budget policies, it's coming very soon. I think in June the budget will be presented. And we would want to see what the government does. And government is pretty tight on revenue. So what it is going to do, we don't know. And central banks have done hugely in the US. US can deal with it apart from politics. You know, really, US can print money and circulate, no problems. Yeah, that's how privileged US is. Not us. We can't print money. If we print money, there will be problems. We'll have to be very careful. It has to be well calculated. It's structural reforms. That is where we have to pay attention, and a lot of effort needs to go there. Okay, I'm coming to Fiji. Health, what did we do? We had 2 deaths. But our health system is in shambles, absolute shambles. That is where I think negligence for the last 5-10 years, plus what we are going to do from now on, I think should go in there, and people like, and hundreds of other doctors we have. Already at 85% of GDP for a developing country like Fiji, we are in a bog, absolute bog. So I think the Minister for Economy already mentioned National Forum that it's 85, and I think the World Bank and IMF, IDB would be generous enough to give, but they would give provide us debt. So that will sink us deeper into debt. How we'll manage if our productive capacities are not catching up? I think that will be a problem. The structural reforms, government has a great work, but it doesn't put its feet down on the ground. This is the problem. Fiji must also set a foundation for robust growth and development in the long run. We have to start thinking problem. The productivity planning report is there, but our issue at the moment, tourism is not what is going to feature much. Alright, I'm just giving a glimpse of the whole system. You can see here the dip. The dip is, we are moving into 122 a few months from here, a few quarters from here, and I think we will pick up, but not entirely. For different countries, the world average for emerging markets. Down, we went deeper as a country. Alright, this is also the global projections. China is doing very fine, despite the fact that virus originated from there. Okay, this is the projection now. These were the projections in 2020, early 2020, but the true ones now, right now, are these ones, which are much lower, which means that what was predicted in early 2020 wasn't quite true for emerging markets or even advanced economies, which is the blue line, right? So the situation is not good for us. It's much worse than what was predicted earlier. Okay, so here I'm just showing you some of the things that would be of interest. Industrial production, that's the blue line, right? Industrial production, that is trade, right? So it's lagging behind a little bit. The yellow line, you can see that yellow line is above, which is the industrial production, which means that bigger economies are producing, okay, and consumption is happening internally, but trade is a bit subdued. All right. Okay, this is Fiji story. All right, Pacific economies and Fiji. All right, Fiji is right at the end. Can you see that? Right here, and we are the worst hit. Right, this is negative. Negative 20, that is our situation. Cook Islands is probably next to us and it's basically tourism, largely because of tourism, right? Cook Islands, 90% of the economy is tourism, right? That's the reason. And also the prediction for 2021 now is 1%. You would remember earlier it was said it would be 11%. The Fijian economy in 2021 would grow by 11%. We are way down. We are only 1/10 of what was predicted earlier. All right? And if you look at the Reserve Bank reports, they will also confirm that. All right, so I'm just showing it again for your information. We were probably the worst hit. It's a grim. I'm showing that 11% here that was predicted. It will never be realized. So we would be hanging at about 1%. Who knows? It would still be negative. Well, we are picking up. It will be positive. All right. So just around 1%. Okay, key economic sector. I just wanted to show you this. These are our primary sectors, also one secondary. This is the manufacturing one. Over the years, we have kind of grown, but marginally. All right. Now there's been a view presented earlier by Dr. Maya. He talked about not so much consumption, but I think for poor countries like ours, we have to depend upon consumption. We have to expand our consumption, right? Because there are lots of poor people, all right? So we would rather want this, we would rather like to see this a little bit steeper, moving up like that, not so much this way. Our agriculture isn't so good. It hasn't grown in real terms. Sugar is going down, I'll show you. The other sectors like forestry, mining, I'm not too worried about that. Those are resource sectors. So it's not very friendly to the environment. So I'm not too worried. But I think we could have done a little better. We could apply, a climate friendly approach to this, and we could have done better, right? All right, these are service sectors, and service sectors have grown much better for us. Tourism, banking, communication, all these have grown. You can have a look. All right, wholesale retail have expanded quite well in the last 10 years. All right, but that's the consumption side. Okay, wholesale retail, transport, storage, all of these have expanded. Even real estate. Okay. There's construction out there. That, I think, is the last one. I'm not able to see it here very well. Can you remove this and blow it up a bit, please? All right. So this one has grown, but not entirely. Because we have an economy which doesn't have a huge infrastructure. I think we would have done better. The kind of expenditures the government has allocated for infrastructure, we really haven't grown so well. And I think the private initiative hasn't really done much in that sector as it should have. All right, so this is admin. Right on the top, public admin, which is the defense and everything the government does. It's right on the top, pretty good. It was expanding, but it turned down a little bit, which is a good news, which means the government has become less expensive. And then you can see education sector is this one, which is the one we are involved in, and you can see it's grown. Okay, and the sad part is the health sector. Health and social services actually has remained here, which is very, very low, which means that our health sector has not expanded, which even when our doctors, the government says that doctors, there are so many doctors here, But what are they doing? Really? Are they unemployed or what? Why has the health sector not expanded? We need good health, we need better health, we need better medical services, we need more medical centers around, don't we? But it hasn't happened. Sugar. People from sugar would be able to say why this happened and whether it would sometimes start moving up. I'm just showing this so that there's some trade balance. We have always been negative. Here it is. We are always negative and we continue to be negative because we consumed a lot and did not produce much. But of course, we had tourism sector which was expanding, which took care. Now the tourism is not there, so it will have problems. And that is the reason why later on I will say we need to export, we need to trade, but not tourism. Tourism probably will not pick up so well. And for the reason that we are going to import, we can't live without imports because we are such a narrow base economy. We'll import oil, we'll import white goods, we'll import consumables. We now even import food. So we'll have to think about how we are going to strategize trade, which means exports. Okay, I just wanted to show this. Our starting a business index is very bad. I just wanted to give you a glimpse of it. It is not very popular amongst the government officials or government politicians. They don't like this to be shown. But we are 161 out of probably 200 so many countries. So we are really doing bad in that. We have fallen down in the last 10 years. So that's the problem. And I think when you want entrepreneurship to develop, if you want our people to become productive and engage in business and creating value out of the ordinary things they have in life, we need good business environment. We don't want the FIRCA or the environment people or FNPF or the city council coming harassing us, which they do. In the COVID era, they relaxed. But pre-COVID, oh, they were terrible. I'm a businessman of sorts, I tell you. They were great. And the bureaucracy and the paperwork, can you imagine small businesses hiring an accountant? Oh my goodness. Doing the tax thing is a terrible, terrible experience for small businesses. You check it out. So those are some of the things we'll have to relax, and the government will have to rethink. You can, buy, fancy, software and things like that, and ways, businesses and people into using that. You can do that, yeah. But it will have its effect, yeah. You can't just say that you will do bad things and yet everything will be nice. So government will have to learn its lessons. I hope they come to senses, right? Getting credit. We are again at the same point. Way down, way down. We'll probably be like some African country that is not growing. 161 out of 200, that's where we are. And it happened after that bureau, what bureau was it? Data Bureau. When the Data Bureau was withdrawn, the government abolished it. We went down. And if you go for loan now, anyone who has gone for loan now will have terrible time producing all kinds of paperwork, data, because the bank would not be convinced that this is your position. So that is what Data Bureau was doing. They would do a click and know what your position is. And if you are a good businessman, if you have been doing a good job in terms of your business, you'll get loans, you'll get credit, you can expand, you can do things that you want, you can introduce new technologies. That is difficult now. So that's where we are, right? Well, this is where the plan comes in. Pretty nicely done plan. It's on the web, you'll find it. Oh, it's glossy. You would like to read some, very glossy statements, okay? The 20-year development plan provides the forward-looking vision for transforming Fiji. Wow, this is fantastic. Towards an even more progressive, vibrant, and inclusive society. It's brilliant. It outlines a framework that encompasses new strategy, or strategic policy approach towards development and the aspirations of all Fijians. Inclusive socio-economic development in terms of distribution, in terms of road, housing and so on. Transformational strategic thrust. All these are very well stated, and I think they are relevant to a large extent. All right? So I have just jotted down a few of them. All of these are relevant even today, post-COVID-19, but policy instruments have to be made clear and effective. The monitoring process, the government's attitude is absolutely bad. Anyone who knows, anyone who has knowledge of economics and development will figure it out. Those glossy words, those glossy presentations, do nothing. We need people, we need foot soldiers, we need people who walk by the feet and do things. That's what we need the government officials, the politicians to be doing. They get a lot of pictures, they get a lot of things in the papers and TV and so on. That should stop. They should start doing the real work. Right? Poverty was at 29% pre-COVID. It was 29%. Actually, it increased by about 1% point. Right? That to 2013 level. So now it should be over 40%. So if you take a walk, in the interior, we don't see it here. The cars are still running, the roads are still there, some patchwork is being done, fine. But there is poverty. We'll have to experience it somehow to really know, and that is when we would start rethinking. It talks about national security. I'm not too sure what it means, but we definitely need a very efficient police force. Our police rep is there. We need very professional police force. We would not want to violate human rights of people to fix things or reduce crime and so on. It requires a lot of hard work. Okay, all other things, small SMEs, all these things are stated in the plan. Fantastic, believe me. Road transport, port services, all these are being talked about in the plan. Air connectivity now, it's not relevant, at least not now. Okay. Digital connectivity, absolutely, more than just relevant. We need to capitalize on it. Okay, we'll have to build capacities. But sadly, is the Vodafone doing any better? No, I think it's quite bad. Much worse than it was 2-3 years ago. Everywhere you get disconnected and all that. I think we should have capitalized on it. I don't know. I don't have knowledge in that part, so somebody can explain. New technologies, enhanced productivity growth, absolutely relevant. Absolutely, always. Appropriate technologies, it is absolutely relevant. Training for efficiency, absolutely relevant. Cost reduction, yes, absolutely relevant. Very important, and for Fiji it's very important because our productivity growth has been very poor. Very, very poor. And because we are a small market and we can't capitalize on technologies. People are not creating technologies in China, US, Europe. They're not creating technologies for small producers. So this is where our creativity comes in. That is where we need our technologists to be getting into modifying the technologies for small production. Everywhere we are small producers, so we have to make things more efficient. If we were to compete with, say, Thailand or Bangladesh even, or Indonesia, not to mention China, we can't even think about competing with China, all right? So we have to think about new technologies, and that is where education comes in. Yeah. It talks about demographic advantage, which is true. We have a lot of young people, huge percentage of young people. All right. As I've said, on the global side, imports will always be there. We can't escape it. So we'll have to think about exports, which means we have to become competitive in production. Government sector is one which we might want to think of. We don't have any entrepreneurs or businesses. Do we have anyone from government? No. Okay. So structural reforms are these list. All of them remain relevant. You can't escape any bit of it. All right. But of course, it needs very, very intelligent, very creative politicians. In land reform, for instance, in sugar industry, it was said it is politicized, but less politics does not mean solving the problem. You can't solve problems through dictatorship when human beings are involved, right? When machines are there, you can fix it. Civil service, you can see what kind of attitudes were taken, what kind of rash decisions were taken some time back. Did it work? I think it's not working. Is it making our civil service more productive? Probably not. I still see, if I go into the government building today, I'll see piles and piles of files everywhere. Police department, the health sector, it's not connected. A patient from Lotoka, if he goes to Suba, they will have no means of, extracting their medical history, nothing. We are still behind, absolutely behind. We'll have to rethink. All right, so monetary policy, Reserve Bank, heaps to talk about that. If you have any questions, I'll answer that. Banks need to be regulated. Banks need to be put in track. Oh, there are few, they're behaving very badly. All right, that's the last bastion of business troubles. We are in business troubles, and the buck stops at the banks, not even the government. Well, the government can make policies. Government can provide some resources for that as well, but banks will have to behave well and fall in line. Government revenues, here it is. Okay, it's fallen. It's fallen in the last, since the COVID hit. All right, and see the expenditure side. It's a sad story, huh? But because our capacities has not increased, because our capacities could not be handled in the crisis. All right, so my take on it, internalize the economy, internalize this circulation, which means we have to start doing small things. We have to rejuvenate small activities within the country. Oh, well, our country is small, but not entirely. We have people in Vanvalevu, we have people in Gandavu, we have everywhere there are people. And I think we can engage them economically. Yeah? Agriculture and fisheries, that's where new sectors can be developed. You can imagine. We have stopped thinking even, all right? Service must intensify, not international tourism. It's dead for the moment. Health sector has to intensify. We have to employ more doctors. We have to employ more medics and so on. We need them. We need activity, and the government has to encourage that and has to establish it. At least give a hand in establishing it. Education, we need more education. Yeah, we have 3 universities for a small population. Is it enough? No. All these, well, at least UniFiji has to grow. And I think this is where we need support from the government. I don't know. The Vice Chancellor will tell you. Social protection, new facilities need to be built. We need so many different kinds of dimensions where we have to assist our people, old people in our homes, poor homes. Let's go and have a look. We need institutions for them. We need services for them. Yeah, our disabled people. Do we have enough institutions for them? Just take a ride from Lotoka to Nendi. Is there one? I don't know. I think there's none. We need many, many of them. Rural development. We need organic production. I think we have to enhance that. We have the capacity for that. Our ordinary farmers are stuck to the land. Traditionally, they are stuck to the land. And I think we should exploit it. Green development technologies. All right, electric vehicles, it's becoming, the way it is coming in developing countries. In Africa, in India, there's a huge surge of it. China is already on the high end, they're already out there. Europe is there, but we will have to rethink. We have to quickly start. Yeah, solar energy, solar farms, domestic supplies. Look at all the roofs around. Huge, solar potential we have. But you'd be surprised what EFL is giving us. 15 cents in terms of money, 15 cents per unit for solar if we supply to them, and they charge us 41 cents. And I've done the calculation, it will take me long to pay off, so I've withdrawn from it. And I know if you do the same calculations, you will do the same. Unless and until it increases to at least 30 cents, you won't find domestic supply of solar power. The diesel that we burn, all those, we have the CEO of EFL who tells you to buy a generator or what. I had that. I can't imagine we have CEO who's telling us that. All right, so coming to education. New curriculum. We have enough thinkers around. I can tell you that. The subject matter, we have to have a spiritual dimension, and I think I would kind of agree with Dr. Maya on that. We are all in material terms, in monetizing terms. We have to come back to human values, and this is where spiritual dimension would be helpful. Familial cohesion. We don't want to be Europe, do we? I think we have to go back to our human values and family values. All right? With less consumption, we can still be accepted. Yeah? The quality of life can still improve. Yeah? With lesser consumption or with the sustained consumption that we have. Preschool, primary school has to intensify. A lot of activities, we have to probably double the activities. Secondary schools, that is where we have semi-adults or whatever. I think we have to relook at curriculum, teaching methods. Social consciousness have to be imbibed into our younger generation that are coming. That is how we would be able to endow them with better things, better society. We have a fractured society. That's the problem. The parliament is not helping. Politicians are not helping. But I think we'll have to reconstruct our ideas. We have to rethink how we talk to people, how we exchange our ideas. I think that's very important. Tertiary education, that is where we are at the moment, and I think we'll have to think again. Environment, climate, all these are coming in. Peaceful coexistence with nature, I think this should be the motto. I think the Samaj is already there somehow, but we might have to reconstruct some of the things so that it also makes economic sense. Productivity, I've talked about it. The red mark is where we are supposed to go if we follow the Asian Productivity Association, productivity levels, which is 3.2. At the moment, it is about 1.2. It is showing it out there, and we will be going down out there. But our plan, the government's plan, is to take that path. Yeah, if it does, which means if we get in more machineries, better machines, better trained people, if we improve our attitudes and so on, we would be closer to that point in 20 years' time. Okay, I will just skip this. This is what the World Bank has said. We have to take care of our debt. If we take more debt, like 200 million came in and some other 100 million came in, that has to be put in the right place. Yeah, not just to pay civil servants or not just to, buy boats or something like that. We have to make those debts more productive. Yeah, more business, more activities and all that. Then it will do good. But I don't have every little thing to tell. We would need experts to come in to do that. Okay, and that's how we will be able to reduce poverty. Okay. We have conventional way of measuring poverty. We can have issues there, but surely to make people happier, to address those social and those human problems, we need a human dimension to our policies. Right, I'll still skip this. Some things that have been said. Making the right investment now is vital for recovery and to build a resilient economy. Right, and it says there is an opportunity. There is surely an opportunity, and we have to capitalize on it. There are many things that we can do, and we really have to get people to do those right things. All right. Internalization, new technologies. We have to look inwards now. We have to start looking at the little things. All right. This is my last slide. Improve business environment. Don't chase. Firqa should not be chasing small businesses. Should not be harassing people, who are doing business. You talk to people whether they want to get into business. They'll say no. Who wants to go into talk? So that attitude, it has basically because of the conditions that prevail. All right. Labor skills. We have to become, because we are small. We have to be multitasked. If we hire someone to say, for myself, when I hire someone for the reception, we would want them to do a bit of administration. We would also want them to do a bit of cleaning stuff, and also do a bit of cookeries and stuff. So multitasking is absolutely important for small economies like this, because you won't get big jobs, big orders, big business every time. So we have to be multitasked, and we have to adopt new technologies and make it appropriate for small businesses. And the last one, ITC, technology and all that. We need more of it. I think we need more of it, and we need to train people. Yeah, we have to train people. Road conditions, it. Well, here to Nandi is okay. But if you get into Suva has terrible roads at the moment. I'm not too sure about Lotoka and all that. But we surely need, because that's the only means. We don't have trains. Train services is one. I think we won't have it in 100 years now. So we have to improve our roads. So that's where I would end my presentation. I've taken a bit longer. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Mar. I think that's food for thought there. I don't think I have actually looked at the economy in that way for quite some time, and I think, even though some of it is quite a shock to the system, but the economy, I think Dr. Mayer pointed that out as well, how you organize your economy is actually how you organize your policies. It's really very policy oriented. The economy isn't something that just lands on our feet from heaven. The direction that the country takes with respect to how its economy is going to be organized is something that is decided at the level of policy, not at the level of scientific thought or anything that just arrives out of nowhere. So I think that's really important. I just very quickly now, because I know we're getting into morning tea time, and after this you'll have an hour and a half or more to discuss some questions that we have as well. The first thing I want to say, I'll just grab my glasses, is how all of this is related to education. The reason why we're here is because we're educators and we want to know how to fix things. We want to know how to solve the problem. What Dr. Kumar has pointed out, and also what Dr. Merchant had said earlier on, is really about the problems. What are we going to do to fix it? And Dr. Mayer has given us some idea of the direction in which we should be looking at in order to be able to change our thinking. So you might be thinking scientifically or according to mathematics or statistics prior to this, or in terms of some direction that policymakers might have given to us. But can we actually turn it around so that we're thinking about things in a different way? And one of the things that's come out very strongly is that how do we do manufacturing or exploit our natural resources or get into a particular kind of industry without also destroying the environment? Because a lot of the investments we do is very short term, and not only is it short term, but it has huge impacts on the environment. So mining, for example, what kind of mining do we do? Are we going to go into mining as an industry? Are we going to exploit our seabeds for mining, for precious metals? Are we going to look for oil offshore? Are we going to, what kind of processes are we going to put into place in order to explore whether we are oil rich? And even if we do get oil, like the Saudis and others, is that fossil fuels? Is that something that we need to look at in terms of an investment at all? So those are the critical questions that have been raised by the speakers this morning, because actually COVID-19, while it is a horrible thing, and obviously we've got other pandemics to come as well, as Professor Merchant pointed out, but COVID-19 has given us an opportunity as well. It's a horrible thing, bad thing, not as bad as the measles and the smallpox and all the others from the past, the Spanish flu, but certainly bad enough. And it could get worse because we have no idea what it's going to end up looking like. But has it then, for us, is it an opportunity to do things differently that we normally might not have been able to do earlier? If you're on a train to nowhere, when do you stop the train? How do you change things? It's very, very difficult to do that. But suddenly when the whole world is on a break, it's almost like nature or the world is giving us an opportunity to think differently. How long we have that small window, we don't know. It might, once the vaccine comes, we all breathe a sigh of relief and say, oh, let's go back to what we were doing before, because that's what's going to give us the value that that Dr. Mayer talked about in terms of the actual monetarized economy. Now for us, because we are educators, and the reason why we are in this room asking for your opinion and that we have appropriate consultation from all different walks of life, including from industry, from the producers, from security people, and from teachers as well. The teachers are very important because, of course, they're the ones who teach the young people of the country, and these are the young people that we get at tertiary institutions. And of course we have NGOs and we have religious organizations. Everyone is in it together. We're going to have to deal with it together. So for educators, when I thought about all the things that people have said, first question for educators is really going back to basics. How important is the economy? We know how important it is, but that question has to be asked. Where do we get our money from? It sounds like, economics 101, but as a layperson, I'm not an economist, I'm a lawyer, and we don't tend to ask these questions normally. I'm an educator, but I was also a sociologist before. And I need to ask, I want to know, where's our money come? Where do we get our money from? How is money produced? What do we need a surplus for? We all know that at the level of our income, we earn our living, we have our salaries, we know how much goes into food, how much goes into transport, how much goes into the kids' fees, clothes and so on, and then we hope we can make a little bit of extra, which will be our surplus that we put in the bank for a rainy day. So that's our savings. So what do we need our surplus for? Do we need it to go on a holiday? Do we need it to invest in property? Do we need it to make more money? These are the questions we have to ask. And how do we generate a surplus? Dr. Kumar showed us that really we're not making a surplus at all as a country. It seems to be going downhill. Okay, well, it's the country, you say, it doesn't really matter, but it does matter. Because the more surplus you have, the more power you have. The more money you have in a bank, the more powerful you are as a nation. And so we need to look at this question of surplus. And the next question, what are the industries, or what were the industries that generated a surplus for us? We know what they were. How did COVID-19 affect these industries? We know what's happened to tourism. Should these industries be rejuvenated? If yes, why? Should we rejuvenate tourism? Should we rejuvenate sugar? Should we rejuvenate everything else? If not, why not? How will they be rejuvenated? If yes, if that's what you answer, yes, then how will they be rejuvenated? If not, what should we do next? And then the next one, what does education have to do with the economy? People will say the economy is there, the education is there. It's linked. Should education come before the economy? Can education drive the economy? That's really the heart of what we want to know at this forum. Is it economy first and education next? Is it industry first, education next? Or is education first and the economy will follow? That's really the heart of the question. And should there be a philosophy of the economy? Should it be the same after COVID-19? Now going to the next slide, which is higher education. This is very much our concern. We need higher education, obviously, because we need qualifications of our people for employment. That's what we all know. There's almost like saying a no-brainer. What do we need education for? You don't need it just to sit down and contemplate something, philosophy or whatever, under the mango tree. People are educated because they need the qualification in order to get employed. And the reasons why you get employed is so that you get money and look after your families, and you have a bit of surplus, and you can do all of those things. Now, so far, higher education has been industry directed. So if you look at the sponsorships for higher education, for which ones are going to be given scholarships or the student loans, it's always whether industry is wanting that particular qualification. That's been the way that since I have been at this university, definitely, it's been the way it's all run. And so if you make an application to the Fiji Higher Education Commission, for example, for a program, you're required to get a letter from stakeholders, and they call them industry stakeholders, and now they don't confine themselves to one industry stakeholders. You've got to get several, and you also have to have a research done in order to be able to produce that data to say that the program that you wish to run at the university has industry support. So our education, higher education, is dictated or directed by industry. And we need to start thinking about whether that's the right thing to do. National priorities are set by TSLV. In your dossier, you will see the national priorities for 2020, national priorities for 2021. Chart is there as well. There's a difference in the two. For one, in 2020, tourism was at the top of the national priorities. In 2021, it's dropped. It's not there at all. It's disappeared. Furthermore, the number of awards for each of those national priority areas has been reduced. So, you might have 120 for education, for producing teachers. Now you might only have 60 awards. So not just the kind of industry that used to be supported before that's changed, but also the number of sponsorships, the number of student loans. Now, student loans should be different from scholarships. You can understand with scholarships because people don't pay those, the amount that's gone into their education back to the government. It's theirs. They can do whatever they like with it. They might be bonded for a while so that they can get put it back into the economy, into the country, and many countries also do that, they do a bond. But the TELS part of it, the student loan part of it, it doesn't matter what you do with it, at the end of the day, you still have to pay the government back, because that's the reason, it's a student loan. Now, there's student loans in every country just about now. When I was in New Zealand working there at the university, students were doing all their studies through student loans, and a lot of student loans get to be very, very expensive. You know, it's very difficult sometimes in the United States. Some students doing postgraduate work have to pay up to almost 100,000 or 200,000 back, and these are the more expensive courses like medicine and law and so forth. It's very expensive, but you do have to pay that back. But you have a choice in what education that you're going to get the loan for. Whereas in Fiji, your sponsorship for both loans and scholarships are according to the national priority areas. And that's something that I've been raising with the DSLB about, because the national priorities, for what reason? Now, the last roundtable had said that we have a different take on what the priorities should be. And there was a list that went to DSLB about what we thought the national priorities should now be. We didn't discuss them in the way that we're discussing it right now, is that the National Development Plan should change, should be revised. It was just that the national priorities ought to be different. So there has been a crisis of confidence in industry because it's collapsed. And a year ago, I had 100% lawyers from the law school of the university, the dean of the law school, employed as lawyers. Fairly decent salaries. A lot of them were employed at the Legal Aid Commission, with starting salary was about 35,000. Others were employed in private law firms. Even the private law firms were paying reasonably well. I asked my law students at the end of last year how many of them had jobs. A lot of them used to be employed before they finished their qualification. And about a third of those students were employed, and most of those students had already been employed, were already in employment before. So they would have been in the judiciary, or they were clerks, and so on. So they already had a job, and they would have done the law studies to upskill themselves. So they just went back to their jobs. They might not have been promoted as they would have thought. They might not have got the vacancies for lawyers. They were still perhaps law clerks, but at least they had jobs. The rest of them don't have jobs. And if you look at how much lawyers get paid now in many law firms, you will find, and this was said at the last Law Society convention as well, Fiji Law Society convention about a month ago, that lawyers are sometimes, law graduates are sometimes getting $150 a week, if that. So why would anybody want to do law when at the end of the 4 years of hard study, 4.5 years, if you take the practitioner's qualification into account, why would anybody want to do law when there's just not jobs available? So we need to start thinking about what jobs are going to be available, but who's going to tell us? Because the jobs that were available before have disappeared, and there is no hope inside for many of these graduates coming out because they don't know where they're going to be employed. So we need to look at national priorities as well at the same time that we're looking at our economy. And the Ministry of Education Strategic Plan, which is also, you can download it from the website, but it could also be in your dossier. I'm not 100% sure whether it is. But there is a strategic plan that is 2019 to 2023. So 2023 hasn't finished yet, or hasn't even come yet, and we're in 2021 at the moment. So there's still 2 years to go. There is no mandate in it for higher education at all. The Ministry of Education, through the Act, tends to deal with primary education, preschool, primary, and secondary education, and TVET, which is the FNU type of, the vocational education, but not for universities at all. The universities are managed through the Fiji Higher Education Commission, through the statute. So the Ministry of Education really can't give any sense of direction to higher education, apart from the TVET universities, as to what kind of people we should be educating and what kind of education program we should have so that people are going to be employed at the end. So what we need, first of all, it seems to me, and I'm purely from my perspective, because you'll all have your own perspectives on this, we need a philosophy of education in Fiji. We've never had a philosophy of education. There's been some direction, that at the moment it seems to me that industry decides what the philosophy of education might be, because you need to get these people employed. But there needs to be also an education sector analysis. And that is something that's not been done for Fiji at all. It's been done for many other countries. There's usually grant or some kind of assistance given to countries who want to do that, like the United Nations, the UNDP does that, UNESCO does it, and also UNICEF does that. But an education sector analysis tells you where everyone is in that country. What is our social environment or context? What is the humanitarian issues that we have to face? And the demographic or the population context. We need that. And one of our staff members, Mr. Tiko, who's formerly PS Education, is engaged in that process, and we look forward to the results of his research. Then the curriculum is dead, as Professor Mamba is very fond of saying. We need to review it. We need to revise it, and we need to revive it. We need to bring it back from the dead, basically. Or we have to give it a decent funeral and go on and find another kind of curriculum, and develop another curriculum that answers to the things that Dr. Mayer talked about, that Dr. Merchant talked about, and Dr. Kumar talked about. We need to think about education as not just formal education, not something that's in the high school, that's something in the primary school, that's something in the formal classroom that you're sitting even at university. We need to think about, conceive of education radically from something that can be given from the cradle to the grave. Everyone is entitled to education. You want to explain or express education in the broadest possible way. What you get in the home, what you get outside, what you get in the classroom, what you get in the community, everything is an aspect of education. Education is as important as the economy. They're not different compartments. Without education, people don't develop mentally or psychologically or in any other way. They do not have anything to then offer themselves, their families, and the community. So we need to look at education much more broadly. And then we need to look at education for economic growth, not for the market. Those are two different things, economic growth and the market. The market has been dictating what education, and what kind of market too. The management people will tell you, the accounting, the economics people will tell you that everything is market oriented, and that's what Dr. Mayer said as well. So the Education Action Plan, remodeling. The country has to have an Education Action Plan. This is why we're here. First of all, we have talked about the fact that we're not putting enough money into social protection. Social protection, investment, education is what we need. You will deal then with the problem of unemployment that we have. Instead of looking at industry, we should be looking at investing in education that is going to make us better with respect to social protection. And that's going to create its own surplus. So in education, in health, welfare, and security. As far as health is concerned, education in all respects. And it's very important for us to realize that there is a bureaucracy or a gatekeeping element that is preventing us looking at health from the broadest possible way. Not just in terms of going to the doctor because you're not sick, but also our mental health and our psychological well-being. Those things are not properly discussed as far as our public health scheme is concerned. Welfare. Now, welfare people will say looking after people who are unemployed, give them a basic living amount so that they're not starving on the street, but it's more than that. One of the biggest problems that Fiji is facing is domestic violence and sexual violence, sexual offences. That's huge. It's like an epidemic. And that's part of welfare. What is it that we're doing in schools, in primary schools, in secondary schools, that tells people that domestic violence or gender-based violence is bad? We're not doing that at all. We're hoping that the Women's Crisis Center is going to deal with it. We're hoping that the Women's Ministry gets sorts it out somehow. But the community is not engaged in that huge epidemic. Because you see, when you have sexual offences to the extent that we do in our community, and I remember Justice Temo giving a presentation several years ago to the Fiji Law Society, and he said that 49% of the statistics that he collected on criminal activity was of sexual nature. So if we've got 49% of all criminal activity being sexual in nature, what is going on in our society? And where does it start? Where do we change that? It's not part of any education program that I've seen. It's not part of any education curriculum it should not be confined to the little groups that deal with that as charitable organizations. And we've got to do something about that. Aged care, how do we look after our people? Child care, the two ends of the spectrum. Then we have security. Now when I talk about security, people think I want to talk about the police or the military. I don't. I want to talk about food security. This is something that Dr. Kumar and I were discussing not so long ago. When we talk about security, it's got to do with how we produce our food, how we protect our environment so that food gets to be produced regularly, how we use our fertilizer, how we exchange food, how we export food, what is it that we're doing over there. Environmentally friendly agriculture is what we're talking about. Surveillance, so that, who knows what fish, what countries out there depleting our tuna reserves in the middle of the ocean. We don't know that, because our Navy, 3 ships or 4 ships or whatever it is never going to get there in time to be able to protect our fisheries. But if you have planes that can, because it's not just about protecting our food reserves and our food supply, it's actually about protecting the environment more than that. Because if you deplete, all the tuna, then what's going to happen to the food chain, the ocean food chain, at the end of the day? It's all related to the issues that face the world right now. Import substitution. We've been incredible. We have been importing rice for so long, but we couldn't grow it. I think it was the Garissa government that got rid of the rice plantations in Nabu and Osori and everywhere else. I remember making a film about this many years ago. And why? Because they said we can get it cheaper from Thailand. And that means all these people who were rice farmers now disappear. Where are they? What are they doing? Driving taxis probably, because that's the only alternative they could do to get their families, food on the table. Green energy, Dr. Kumar talked about that, I'm not going to go there, and of course small producers. I was heartened by the fact that there is actually an organization of small producers in Fiji. I only learned about this a couple of days ago when there was a picture of the Mr. Cole and a ginger person who's the Association of Ginger Farmers and Copra Farmers. And I thought, goodness, this is something we need to look at, the small producers. Are we supporting them? Are we making it too difficult for them to run a business? How is it that, when they get into organizations and so on, how can we support the industry, the small producing industry? Because most of the small producers have industries or their agriculture products that are environment friendly at all. They know how to use the land because, one copper crop goes and you know that you have to wait another how many years to get another copper. So people are actually very conscious about the environment when you're a small producer. We need to support that. And then the next one is, so the first one is really about what kind of remodeling we're supposed to be doing. We can do social protection, education, that's the first one. The second one is education for teaching people and politicians the consensus approach to political relationships. At the moment, we're fighting each other like, World War III. Somebody's insulting somebody else is taking out a defamation suit against someone else. And these are politicians, they're supposed to be expressing themselves, supposed to have freedom of expression in Parliament. That's what Parliament is all about. But they're shouting at each other. Who's listening to anything? Parliament is one big drama. Do we need that kind of, very close to Bollywood type of production in Parliament? Because these are our leaders and they're exercising responsibility on our behalf. So what is it that we're not doing to bring the sides together? We're talking to each other. Are we talking to each other? Doesn't seem to be. Conflict is costly. It is costly. Who's paying for all these defamation applications to court? Who is? It's the taxpayers. That's who's paying. Because the more defamation, actions that you take against each other if you're a political figure, the more money is needed for the judiciary to be expanded. And who's paying for the judiciary? It's the taxpayers. That's where that's where the money goes. So it's costly. Let's get away from this adversarial approach. Now, mediation training is very important. Mediation Centre, I think perhaps they are online. They're on the live stream. Mr. Watson, Martha, is there somewhere? And he was attended our last roundtable, and he's there again. He's selected by Mr. James Hito, who's the chairperson of the Fiji Mediation Council. We need to have mediation. as a compulsory part of our education. Mediation training is incredibly important. Leadership training in rights and responsibilities, and then the notion of the social contract, which is a legal, that's where the legal training comes in. The social contract is a relationship between the people and those who rule. That's what the social contract is about. It's a constitutional issue. The Constitution of Fiji is a document of social contract, and the Bill of Rights provisions in there specifically. It sets out the responsibility of the government, or the state, actually not the government, because governments come and go, but states remain. It sets out the responsibility of the state and the responsibility of the people. And if one breaches, then there's consequences for it. So if the people breach the contract, then the police will charge them and off they go to jail. If the state breaches, it's a lot more difficult to do anything as far as the state is concerned. What people will say, we'll wait for the next election and vote them out. That's the only way you're going to deal with, a breach of the social contract as far as the state. But before we get to that point, we need to be able to understand, every single person needs to be able to understand in this country what the social contract between the state and the individual or the state and a community means, how to respect it, and how to ensure that it works properly for the good of the entire society. Because like I said, conflict is what happens when the social contract breaks down. That's why you have revolutions. The American Revolution was about the social contract breaking down between the United States, individual states, and the United Kingdom, the king. The French Revolution was a breach of a social contract between the people and the kings of France. So social contract, when it breaks down to that extent, and maybe in Thailand, not Thailand, Myanmar, those of you watching the news right now, that looks like a social contract breaking down as well. How it's going to end, nobody knows. But there's all these people who are protesting on the streets, young people, old people, everyone's out there. That's a mark of a social contract breaking down. How are they going to resolve it? Freedoms and limitations, human rights education in school. I have proposed that for many years, so curriculum needs to change to incorporate that. Now, the next slide, please. What is our problem? Our problem is a bureaucratized education system. I call it the failure model. There's too much bureaucracy around. And if we're talking about in the old, the market model, one of the joys of the market model that was told to us beforehand, the structural reforms and so on, is that we've got to make government smaller. We've got to make bureaucracy smaller. Because what bureaucracy does is play a stopping role for people when they want to progress and to improve the economy. That's what the bureaucracy does. That's their job. How many pieces of paper and how many forms you have to fill before you can get your business going. How many times you have to go to the tax and report on your VAT once every quarter. Those things become very, very difficult, and they impede development, and particularly the development of the economy. So I call these people the bureaucrats, the gatekeepers, because they keep the gate and make sure you don't get through, except with a great deal of difficulty. So post-COVID-19 is the question that I raise. Are our education agencies, and there are quite a few, fit for purpose? Do they have the ability? Do they have the qualifications? Do they have the experience? And do they have the understanding of how the education sector works? These are people in education. We have many agencies we deal with. We have TSLB, we have FHEC, we have the Ministry of Education itself. We have a whole myriad of education agencies, from primary, deal with primary to secondary to higher education. Are they fit for purpose? Because we cannot reform the education sector when we have all these gatekeepers who are actually not very qualified or experienced or understand, ill-informed and undereducated is what I call them. And reviews of all of them is needed, or are needed, and we need to look at it in terms of the constituency approach. And when I look around the table now, I see this is the constituency. This isn't just a round table of disparate groups, it's actually the constituency voice. Just about every section of the constituency is represented here. Finally, what we need is a revolution in education. to transform our society economically, socially, politically, and fundamentally for a new world order, because that's what we're looking at, a new world order. If we don't get a new world order, then we will be delivering more of the same, and we're getting going downhill rapidly. That's what's happening. So in 50 years' time, we are not going to be able to promise our kids anything. Nothing. Those of us who are fortunate and have land, you can say, we'll go back to the land and start growing things. People have started doing that already, during COVID. You might remember a lot of people were given seeds from and seedlings from the agriculture ministry, so they grew their bagan in the back, and their bele and all of that. But the other thing that happened is that people started to overfish. That's what happened. So in Durban and Pacific Harbour, people were reporting on these sharks that were coming closer and closer to the shore. And they thought it was because the tourists used to go and do shark diving and all that, and so those guys who used to be involved in shark diving weren't going to feed the sharks out there that they used to, just so that the tourists could watch, the sharks swimming in front of them. And that was why it was. But those guys said, no, we still go and feed the sharks because, we've been feeding them. They're almost like our pets, right? So we feed the sharks. So what was it? It was because the people in their small boats and off the rocks were going and fishing and fishing and fishing, because that was the only way they could feed their families, along with the belly and everything. And maybe the ndalo, but ndalo takes too long, maybe the kumala, whatever it was out in the backyard that they have. That's what happened. And there's Mr. Sito sitting there. He will tell you about nutrition as well. What COVID-19 has meant for us looking into our own backyard so that we can feed our families properly, rather than relying on the chips and everything else that we did before. So that's what I'm saying. The whole thing about this roundtable is that we've got to think about it. You're all here. This is your responsibility today, to think about this new world order, to think about what our national development plan should look like in the future, and give us advice in higher education. What should we do right now? Because we don't have the answer to those questions. All we can do is trigger a few ideas about how we think and our perspectives. We're not the experts by any means. An economist will tell you something, a politician will tell you another thing, an educator will tell you something else, a lawyer will tell you something else, and a doctor will tell you something else. But you collectively are able to give us some ideas about how the country should move, not just higher education, but what should happen to the nation. And if we can use our nation as an example, then perhaps the world will also follow, because we already are leading in COVID-19 control. We're sitting here like this with each other, but not many of our colleagues elsewhere are able to do that. So we're already leading the way in some respects. Now we should lead the way in a much more important sense that will make a difference to the way the world is going. So thank you very much. Now morning tea is available. I'm sorry, we've gone on a little bit, but this is important. And after that, we'll be breaking up into groups, and you've got some questions, and you may debate those questions with each other, and then you'll be presenting that. It'll be your turn then in the afternoon. You'll be presenting your ideas back to the plenary. So thank you so much.